Chapter 5, Sports for Nerds. Growing up, I played basketball, baseball, golf, and soccer. I was decent at all of them, but not nearly good enough to play at a higher level. I mean, physically, I was NBA ready, a classic lottery pick. But emotionally, I was too immature to handle the sudden fame and fortune. So, I told a young LeBron James, sorry man, you're going to have to do this without me. The one sport I was actually good at was swimming. I swam and dove competitively from ages 4 to 18. But I peaked at the age of 8. That's when I won a gold medal in diving for all of Staten Island, by 1 point over Steve Deppie. Suck it, Steve! And qualified for the Junior Olympics in the 50 and 100 meter breaststroke. I placed 16th and 32nd. Suck it, me! But even though I loved being in water, I never enjoyed swim meets. It always seemed like they were imposing structure and stress on something that should have been freeing and fun. For example, going down a slide is awesome, but if you had to show up every day for slide practice at 7 a.m. and then compete against your best friend in slide competitions, while grown-ups screamed at you to slide better until your friend won and you cried, slides would seem a lot less awesome. And yes, I cried after the 1994 breaststroke finals when the official said I lost even though technically I had a faster time. And yes, I was beaten by Steve Deppie. And yes, I just Googled Steve Deppie and discovered he now runs a successful wealth management business in San Diego. And yes, his online corporate profile says, as a former athlete, Steve continues to exercise daily, whether it's lifting weights, running, swimming, or playing sports. And yes, the fourth example he gave of exercise was sports. And yes, I just went out and bought goggles and a Speedo and went down to my local pool and didn't leave until I swam 100 laps, hoping that would be more laps than Steve Deppie swam today. But really, who even cares anymore, right? Not me. It's not a competition, even though I'm not even married yet and Steve is already the proud father of his daughter, Cameron. Plus, he's an avid sports fan who never misses his favorite TV show, SportsCenter. We get it, Steve. You fucking love sports. Anyway, by the time I got to high school, I was pretty burned out on swimming. And my new commute made it almost impossible to get home in time for afternoon practice. So I made the decision, once again, to prioritize my brain over the inefficient body that housed the brain. I would also like to point out, and this is a real FU to Michelle Obama's Let's Move program, the more sports I played as a kid, the fatter I got. Why? It doesn't make sense. I was a 5-sport athlete and I looked like Pizza the Hut was eating an additional pizza. It's actually a testament to how incredibly caloric American food was in the 90s that a boy who exercised constantly could steadily gain weight. My mom was a family doctor who should have theoretically understood nutrition, yet at least once a week, my brother and I split an entire can of Pillsbury cinnamon rolls. That's 4 cinnamon rolls each, for breakfast. It didn't help that after every practice or swim meet, we'd go to McDonald's and my dad would ask, what do you want to order in addition to your value meal? Because a double quarter pounder with cheese plus an extra large fries and an extra large Coke wasn't enough to satisfy the 9-year-old garbage disposal I had become. I also needed a regular double cheeseburger on the side and some chicken nuggets for the table. The table consisting of me and my dad. Then we would go to Wendy's after McDonald's to polish it off with a chocolate Frosty. I should be dead, just to be clear. This is right before I appeared in Young and the Busty, Volume 12, which led to a starring role in 10-year-old titties. I swear to God, I spent most of my childhood convinced I had breast cancer. One of my nipples was puffier than the other one. Probably a cinnamon roll had gotten lodged in there. And I thought, that's the lump. I have breast cancer. I'm the first male tween with breast cancer. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell a doctor? Would they have to make a special awareness ribbon for me that was half pink, half blue with the faces of all 5 Backstreet Boys? I remember thinking, I can beat this thing. I'm not going to become another statistic. There were no statistics. No 10-year-old boys had breast cancer. But every time I touched my nipple, which was 50 times a day, I felt terrified. And then, of course, hungry. But back to swimming. I quit the only sport I was ever good at, but not before I spent one last summer lifeguarding at Hillside Swim Club. Hillside had by far the best swim team on Staten Island. Every kid was super competitive and trained year-round so they could win the championship, which they did, 25 years in a row. The adults at the club were also super competitive, only their sport was drinking. They had only a few months of summer, and they didn't want to remember a single day of it. As a lifeguard, you were expected to watch their kids and make sure no one drowned. But what they really expected of you was to switch the keg before it ran out of beer, or they would legit fire you. Somehow they skipped over tapping a keg during CPR training. In order of priority, it went, number 1, check the keg. 2, double check the keg. 3, get the backup keg on ice. 4, clean the toilets decimated by adults who drink 15 beers a day. 5, really double check the keg. 6, don't let a kid die. And 7, check for glass on the pool deck because someone dropped a bottle of beer while the keg was being switched over. There were 3 lifeguards on duty at all times to monitor a pool that never had more than 10 kids in it. We were bored out of our minds. The closest I came to a rescue was when a kid yelled, "Hey, I've got a cramp." And I said, "Then stand up. You're in 3 feet of water. And why are you eating a sandwich in the pool?" Between lifeguarding shifts, I was also commuting back into Manhattan to intern at Merrill Lynch 3 days a week under the tutelage of a financial advisor named Rocco. This was right before the dot-com bubble burst, so employees at Merrill Lynch were saying things like, "This company can't lose, and our stock price just keeps going up and up. I'm sure that will continue forever." My bosses would show me a printout of how much money they were making, millions of dollars a year, and say, "What a job, and I'm barely doing anything." To this day, I distrust all money managers because I saw how little they actually managed anything. My boss would say, "Hey, Colin, here's a pie chart of where Mrs. Reynolds is keeping her money. And here's a pie chart of how she wants her money invested. Can you click a few buttons to make the pie charts look the same?" That was 90% of the job. The other 10%, that was lunch. When I worked there, Merrill Lynch's stock price was $120 per share. They were later bought by Bank of America for $29 per share. Still, I was determined to learn as much about our financial system as possible. So while I sat in the lifeguard chair, ostensibly monitoring lives, I would read textbooks about finance with titles like Investor's Guide to Treasury Bonds and the mechanisms behind the stock market. Needless to say, I was single. Next to me was a lifeguard named Anthony, pronounced Antony, who has joined the Navy in 3 weeks. He wouldn't sit in the lifeguard chair. He would hang from it and do pull-ups while every girl at the swim club watched and ovulated. Antony was, you might say, more popular than me. The last week before the summer ended, Antony snuck us 2 beers in the keg and asked me, "So, what are you going to do if you don't swim no more?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll focus on academics instead." Yeah, I was going to say, you should definitely do that. Because the physical stuff, where you need to use your body and muscles to do things, that might not be for you. Yeah, maybe not. No, like 100% not. I mean, this isn't even an intervention or nothing, but seriously, don't do sports no more. Okay, got it. Do you though? Because I'm worried about you doing more sports. It could affect your breast cancer. I promise I'll stop. Good. And hey, go Navy. We clinked glasses, and then he left to have a threesome with the 2 hottest female lifeguards. And my days as an athlete were officially over. Or were they? Speech and debate is a sport, okay? There are trophies. There are tournaments. You have to stand on your feet for upward of 10 minutes at a time. It's a goddamn sport. It has to be. Otherwise, my high school bedroom was a joke. It was filled with trophies and plaques that looked exactly like sports trophies, except there was a beautiful angel on top with golden wings and oddly large breasts, just like mine. Oh, and the difference is that if you looked at the inscription on the trophy, instead of saying MVP, baseball, or most assaults lacrosse team, my trophy said, and I'm paraphrasing, will not have sex in high school. Repeat, Colin will remain a virgin until he stops doing speech and debate. If you're an overprotective parent, here is my advice. Get your child involved in speech and debate today. It's like a chastity belt with a condom wrapped around it. So if someone tries to have sex with the belt won't get herpes. I don't quite understand why it works that way. If anything, speech and debate should have helped me with sex. I was away most weekends for tournaments in hotels in random cities with girls from other high schools. Yet sex was the farthest thing from anyone's mind. It was like trying to get laid in a cemetery. Just saying the word oratory was like a magic spell that ensured sexlessness for another year. But that's not to say we didn't have fun. I mean, my friends and I would pretend to be WWE wrestlers and wrestle each other on the hotel bed. Or while my friend Chris was sleeping, my friend Tim would put his nuts on Chris's face. Or a whole group of guys would order a porno on the hotel TV and just sort of watch it together. You know, cool, not sexually repressed stuff like that. But let me start with some fundamentals. For those of you who don't know, speech and debate is like track and field for nerds. And that's saying a lot because track and field is already pretty nerdy. As with track and field, speech and debate has many different categories, and there was a real divide between the speech team and the debate team. Just like track is made up of runners and field is made up of a bunch of weirdos throwing things around a field. The style of debate at my school was mostly Lincoln-Douglas, modeled after the historic debates between Lincoln Park and Michael Douglas. Each tournament had a resolution for the two sides to argue about, such as handguns ought to be outlawed in the U.S., adolescents should make their own healthcare decisions, or dogs are great and cats are dumb. And you'd alternate taking the pro and the con, so it forced you to think through both sides, even though any sane person would agree that dogs are great and cats are dumb. Disagree? Send proof that your cat is smart to the American Association of Idiots. Attention, yourself. 1, 2, 3 is all you can count to road. Dogs rule the earth. 90210. I get really frustrated competing in debate because inevitably some tool bag I was debating would find a way to make every topic devolve into a potential nuclear holocaust. He'd say, well, if we don't ban abortion, then one of the unborn babies will survive and become an evil genius and steal our nuclear weapons. And at that point, there's a greater than 100% chance of complete nuclear holocaust. And I would stand up and say, Judge, this man has no dick. And somehow that didn't win the argument. So I quickly moved over to the speech side where I could do my own thing and not worry about accidentally calling my opponent an asshat. Speech included intellectual categories like extemporaneous speaking, for those who dreamed of becoming president, and student congress, for those who dreamed of being a state senator. But it also had artsy categories like dramatic interpretation, I have AIDS, humorous interpretation, sung, I have AIDS, and duo interpretation, we both have AIDS, in unison. These categories were for theater kids who weren't cool enough to do actual theater, like myself. There were also in-between categories that were neither intellectual nor artistic. Those included original oratory, you wrote a speech and performed it, declamation, you borrowed a speech from someone like Martin Luther King Jr. and delivered it with twice the volume and 1/1000th the impact, and the oral interpretation of poetry and prose, which I believe was a category invented by homophobic bullies. Who else would put the words oral and poetry in the same name? Everyone called it OI for short, as in, I should never read poetry I had for 10 minutes and expect my peers to still respect me. I prided myself on doing as many different categories as I could, probably because I was already scared of commitment, but also because I liked the variety of performing in different ways. Like how a lot of mimes are also serial killers. Also, if you only compete in one category, then you have to hear the same speeches from your opponents hundreds of times. If I had to listen to some kid with a thick Long Island accent recite The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost for an entire school year, the road I would have taken would have been blowing my brains out. That's the strangest thing about speech and debate, how self-serious some of the kids are. There were white kids from private school on the Upper West Side performing excerpts from John Leguizamo's Ghetto Clown with no sense of irony. You haven't lived until you've heard a kid named Ezra Kleinman very earnestly deliver the line, "I did what any other Spanish kid raised in the ghetto would do. I acted like a retard." I did original oratory a lot, where you write your own speech. And I essentially treated it like stand-up, where I'd have a loose theme and then try to tell as many jokes as possible. There was always a moment when you walked into the classroom and saw the titles of the speeches your competitors were going to perform, and you knew immediately when it was going to suck. You'd see titles like, "Come and Get Me, Cancer," "My Mom, the Ghost," "What We Found in Grandpa's Attic," "Oops, No Arms," and "How My Vacation to Aruba Quickly Descended into Dolphin Rape." Then I would have to go up and write the title of whatever goofy speech I'd come up with like, "I'm white and it's fun," or "It's pronounced Colin, not Colin." And I just hoped for a judge who wanted to laugh and not contemplate, "Where did our innocence go?" A real title of another student's speech, by the way. His answer? "Video games stole it." That's right. A 15-year-old was like, "These damn newfangled video games, always stealing our precious innocence." My friends and I spent half our time recreating the cheesy performances from other schools, which was so much more fun than earnestly doing our own pieces. For example, The Elephant Man is a beautiful, moving play, but not one that should be performed by a blonde teenager from California named Zeke. "I'm not an animal. I'm a human being, Broham." There were also genuinely amazing performers who made me realize how limited my own skills were. I remember seeing this one guy who was a few years older, named Josh Gad. He won every national tournament my freshman year, and I said, "This kid's going places," like I was a 1920 silent movie director. Then I completely forgot about him until I went to see The Book of Mormon on Broadway, and I thought, "Who is this talented fella?" I looked at the playbill and thought, "Another Josh Gad?" And there was Hallie Jackson, who I'd always see at national tournaments for original oratory, and she was one of the few people who wrote good speeches and was also cool. And then I ran into a Hallie Jackson who was a reporter for MSNBC at the Republican Convention in 2016 and thought, "You look just like the Hallie Jackson I knew from original oratory, except you're no longer a foot taller than me." And most important, just like getting into Regis helped me discover the world outside of Staten Island, speech and debate helped me discover the rest of America, including major universities, where a lot of the tournaments took place. It was like doing a college tour, only with your friends instead of your parents. Plus a Catholic priest as a chaperone, but I'll leave those jokes aside for now. And it motivated me to work harder in school because I really wanted to get into one of those colleges. By my senior year, I had qualified for the national championship in original oratory, declamation, student congress, duo interpretation, and the oral interpretation of poetry and prose. I also qualified for the state championship in all of those categories, plus extemporaneous speaking and Lincoln Douglas debate. Let's just say I had a lot of Busty Angels on my bookshelf. And those trophies actually meant a lot to me because, again, I started out at a zero in terms of talking. So speech and debate at least validated that I could talk and might even excel at it someday. Plus, whenever I did fail, which happened just as frequently, or I'd gotten a strange experience with a judge, one of them wrote, "Your performance was a little too Jewish." I learned that it was okay because there was always another tournament the next week where I could redeem myself. It's a lesson I still remember every week at SNL, where even the most successful writers and cast members get their sketches cut all the time. It sucks in the moment, and it takes a few days to get over, but there's always another chance next week. And that is how my vacation to Aruba quickly descended into dolphin rape. By the way, I guess because the tournament was in Georgia, anyone from New York was just automatically Jewish. Also, if you thought I was too Jewish, just wait until Ezra Kleinman does Ghetto Clown.